So I worked as a software engineer for one of Japan's biggest tech companies for about 3 years. And I just want to talk a little bit about how I got there because it was actually a very unexpected career decision for me. But I'm hoping that this can help people who are also trying to transition to a career in tech. So I don't actually have a background in tech or coding or anything like that. My academic background is actually in Japanese and education. I went to college in the US where I studied Japanese as a second language, and I also studied education, hoping I could become either an English teacher in Japan or a Japanese teacher in the US, which is my home country. And a lot of things didn't go as expected from there. I ended up coming to Japan exactly 10 years ago on the JET program, which is well known for giving people the chance to work in schools in Japan and teach English. I actually didn't go that route, and I ended up being a CIR instead, where my work revolved a bit more around translation and kind of using my Japanese and English knowledge to help people communicate with each other. There, I basically did translation work for about 3 years, after which my contract came to an end. So I started looking for new jobs at the time, and just by chance, I interviewed with a company called Mercari, which was a pretty new and growing company at the time. It's now pretty well established in Japan, but at the time it was kind of in a phase of rapid growth. So my timing was good, and I managed to join that company as a translator and interpreter for their language team. And this was very much a young tech startup at the time. So I would go to a lot of meetings with software engineers and product development teams, and I would do my best to interpret at those meetings and help people communicate, because there were a lot of Japanese engineers who didn't speak English so well, and there were also a lot of engineers who came from abroad and they didn't speak Japanese so well. So there was a big language gap. And again, I didn't have any background in tech or any knowledge of tech really, so it was an extremely hard job at first because I had no idea what people were talking about, and I literally couldn't translate what they were saying half the time. So I was like, okay, I need to learn more about tech. Maybe I should learn how to code, learn a little bit more about what engineers do on a daily basis so that I can actually contribute more as a translator. So I did that. So I spent a lot of my free time studying technical things, not only how to code, but also how product development works. And over time, after seeing these engineers build some really cool products and release them to the world, I started to become interested in engineering myself. And I thought, okay, what if I could become an engineer in this company? Like, what if I studied this technical stuff, got good at coding, and asked my boss if I could transfer to an engineering team? Would that work? And as it turns out, I wasn't the only one who thought of this. There were some other people just like me who came from non-technical backgrounds, worked in this company in more like business-oriented roles, and they ended up transferring to the engineering team because they found a way to acquire that knowledge and the necessary skills by themselves. So I was like, okay, I want to do that. So I started to take this engineering thing a bit more seriously. And first I signed up for an online coding class called Code in Place, which was actually offered by Stanford University during the first year of the pandemic. And that was a really good opportunity for me to learn the basics of coding over the span of about 1.5 months. And it was also really good because I learned during that time that I like coding, and that I found the process of using logic to solve problems, writing code, all that was pretty enjoyable for me. So I thought, okay, maybe engineering might be a good career. So after that, I decided to join a coding bootcamp, which went a lot more in depth. And the bootcamp I joined was called Wagon, which took place over the span of about 6 months. And it was part-time, so I continued working at my full-time job while attending classes on weekday nights and weekends. And this was very intense. It was like 20 hours of studying every week, on top of working my day job. And it was not easy by any means, but I learned way more during that time than I imagined I would. And when that was all done, I was ready to kind of start the official transition to engineering within my company. And luckily, at this point, I had already been working at the company for a couple of years. So I had a good number of friends and connections in the company. I had worked with a lot of different teams, and there were people there who who knew me and trusted me already. So after talking to a bunch of people, including my bosses at the time, we decided that yes, I could transfer to the engineering division if I passed a set of interviews. Now, they weren't going to let me in there for free, of course. You know, I would have to prove myself and show them that I actually know how to code, how to think like an engineer and stuff. So I did those interviews, and the hardest part by far was the first technical interview, which was algorithm based. So I grinded lead code for several months, learning how to solve these crazy technical problems, which was it was a little bit painful, but I managed to figure it out somehow. And then I passed the first interview, and then after that, the following interviews were more about like mindset and culture fit, and talking about what kind of projects I've built so far. And the whole process of transferring took around 2 or 3 months. It wasn't quick by any means. But at the end of the day, I managed to make the switch and I got my first engineering job. So I worked as a backend engineer on the company's app for almost 3 years. And that whole experience of changing my career was really crazy for me because, you know, I had never been like a technically minded person. Like I was always bad at like math and science and stuff in school. I very much thought I would just always work a job that didn't involve any sort of like logical thinking. And then, you know, a couple years into my career, I ended up as a freaking software engineer, which is the last thing I thought I would be. But I learned that your career and your life can go in a lot of unexpected directions. And I also learned that if you want to change your career at any point, you can probably do it. Like there's nothing stopping you from just learning a new skill from scratch and then using those skills to land a new job. And of course, like in the world of tech, you know, there's a lot of different ways to become an engineer. You know, the path that I took, simplified a bit, was join a tech company in a non-technical role, doing stuff that I already know how to do. Make connections during that time, build trust with other people in the company, and also use your free time to learn the skills that you need for a new job. And then after all that's done, leverage those connections you have and use it to switch to a new position within your company. That's something that is surprisingly doable, even in a country like Japan, where the work culture tends to be a little bit more rigid and, you know, things aren't quite as flexible, but it can be done. You know, it just takes a little bit of commitment and a little bit of hard work. But, you know, I'm not the smartest person in the world. And I can be quite lazy most of the time, but I was able to take my career in a new direction. And I hope you can too if you're trying to do that. So yeah, that's just my little story. Hope it was interesting or useful in some way. And if you have any questions about you know, working in tech in Japan or working in Japan in general, feel free to ask me in the comments and I'll be happy to answer you. Yeah, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.